Great. Thank you, Walter. Really good listening to you and hearing what's going on at NINDS. And welcome, everybody. I'm so happy you're here today. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you a little bit about our experience, what Robin and I went through with Lewy Body Dementia. So first, I want to kind of discuss a little bit about the films and particularly Spark, which maybe some of you have already seen. And if not, I hope you do get a chance to go to the link that was sent and check it out. Spark is essentially the 45-minute more medical version of Robin's Wish. Robin's Wish is the more full-length feature documentary film. And it's closer to 90 minutes, not quite. And again, Spark is about 45. And just to kind of go back to how those films came about, first of all, rather reluctantly, I'm an artist and I have a local framer that I go and get my artwork framed by. And he kept talking to me as I was going through learning about the science behind what had happened. You know, this was after Robin had left. He kept saying to me, Susan, I think you should talk to Tyler Norwood. Tyler had done a film. He knew of Tyler. Tyler's a local filmmaker. And I kept thinking, there's no way I'm going to go talk to a filmmaker. Like I'm trying to figure out what happened to Robin, what we went through. I'm putting the science together. I'm trying to understand this. And I do not want to go talk to a filmmaker. So I refrained from that for about 6 months, it seemed like. And every time Jim would every time I'd go in and get something framed, he'd say, I really think you should sit down and talk with Tyler. Well, finally I called Tyler and I could see that, wow, he really had both sides of the brain going. He was interested in the science and he was interested in telling the story. He was an artist and he was science oriented. And so my hope was, I really wanted him to do a science documentary. That's what I was interested in, because what I felt like I'd come across, that Robin and I had come across, it was so shocking to me at how little is known about it, that I thought the most important thing is that we could do with our experience was get this out there in the film in the way of a science documentary. Well, Tyler's response to me was no way. Just simply no way. He had no interest in doing a science film. And I was kind of shocked. And he said, but what I would love to do, Susan, is focus on your and Robin's story in the last year of his life and what you guys went through. So he said, let's just sit down, put a camera on it and start talking. And that's when that all started, probably late 2015, I think. And it took about 4 years to complete everything. And so Robin's Wish came out of that. And then my real wish was, came out better than I could have ever imagined. Tyler was incredible and everyone involved gave of the deepest way they could from their heart and truth. And, but the science film did come about, and that is Spark. And I say science because it does contain more interviews than, particularly with Dr. Jim Leverins, which is not covered in Robin's Wish. And he really focuses on the specifics of LBD. So there are things that are more key to the disease itself in that film. And I do hope you get a chance to see both, actually. Spark is a little more difficult to come by. So the best way to find that is through the link that was sent to you. Robin's Wish is available on demand and streaming services, and including iTunes and Amazon Prime. Okay, so that's a little bit about the films. I just want to really outline for you that our story, what we went through is an example of what you don't want to have happen. And our story is not unique either. You know, there's over 1.5 million people or so are dealing with this in the United States alone. And so it's not unique, but our story is definitely one where we did not have a diagnosis. And it really, the complications from not having a diagnosis is why this is definitely something, the path we ended up taking that was just the way it unfolded for us, is not what you want to have happen. And I think that so much can be learned from that. So much can be shared from that can make a difference for obviously for other patients, caregivers, and for science and the researchers, which is so critical to changing the map of all this stuff. So first of all, well, I already said first of all, second of all, or next. So what happened is, you know, Robin and I, a key element is that we didn't know what we were, we didn't have a diagnosis. It was only clear in autopsy. And the autopsy report was read to me like August, September, like 2 to 3 months after Robin had passed. And when that was, you know, he and I had been searching tirelessly for a year, chasing symptoms and trying to understand and get to the bottom of what was causing these 40+ symptoms that were just aggravating and tearing him apart. And nothing seemed connected. And so when the autopsy was read, and I finally got the name of what Robin and I had been searching for, it was the cause, the real cause behind his death was diffuse Lewy Body Dementia. You know, that was when I had what I needed. I had what Robin and I had both had needed and been searching for. And I got to then start to go down the path of, I have the name. It really felt like I have the name of Robin's killer. And I know that sounds extreme, but anyone who's experienced this disease, you know, personally understands that something is taking their loved one's life from them and from the planet. And so having that name, I was able to start, you know, going after, what does this even mean? I'd never heard of Lewy body anything before. I had no understanding of brain disease. I hadn't even really lost anybody in my life that was close to me. And this was the closest, you know, and in a devastating, terrible way to go. In a way, in fact, where I felt like Robin's choice was actually probably the bravest thing he'd ever done in his life. And I had total understanding of why he needed to do that. So with that name, I set out on a search to understand the science behind what happened. And in a way, I really felt like, you know, that was my way of coping. That was my way of making it through this position that I was suddenly in my own life. And so what I didn't expect to happen was the amount of healing that would come to me personally in understanding the science, in understanding the mechanics of this disease. It shed light on everything that Robin and I had gone through. It was a million aha moments that happened and cascaded from each bit of information that I understood more about this disease. So when that all started to happen, all I could think of was, this needs to be shared. Like, how come nobody knows about this? Clearly not nobody knows about it, but general public, you know, or at least myself, I felt like I had no idea about this. So basically what it was like is, or where it started was about 10 months before Robin left. And he started experiencing this extreme gut discomfort. And really that was kind of like the first, I'm sure there were things before that, and there was probably a long prodrome phase, could have been 15 years prodrome, who knows? But the real obvious one was this sudden gut discomfort that led to, you know, that turned out to be nothing. We thought it was diverticulitis. They checked, it was nothing, but it was, that sparked this new onset anxiety sustained. And I've come to understand that new onset anxiety sustained can be a hallmark of LBD. And this was extreme. You know, I already knew my husband's, by that point, we've been together over 5 years, 6 years almost. And I knew his normal behavior when it came to fear, anxiety, you know, moods. It's like we all have our normal foundation level of what that is. And we tend to know that about the people we're closest to, where they operate. Well, this new onset anxiety was way out of character for Robin. And everything, you know, so what started happening was all these different 40+ symptoms started popping up. Now, did I know they were 40 plus symptoms? No. Did I know they were connected? No, because they came up like whack-a-mole and they all seemed like they were unrelated, you know, and all the testing we did over the next 10 months, which was a lot, and Robin hated it. He hated all of it. He didn't like to get his blood drawn. He didn't like, there was just so much stuff that we went through, and MRI scans, and they thought there was a tumor on the pituitary maybe, and we checked for everything. And all that came back, that was the only clear nugget we had, was that Robin had really high cortisol levels. And then, so what ended up happening is, well, the high cortisol levels, you know, you start to, without a diagnosis, without a clear understanding of what's happening in the brain and where, you start to weigh out, well, he's working nonstop. He's been on night shoots for Night at the Museum in London in his time off from shooting the Crazy Ones in LA, when all the normal actors on the Crazy Ones are taking a week off. Robin went through a time change and a night shift change from day shoots to night shoots in the week off, and then went back to Crazy Ones and hit the ground running. And you go, well, is it any wonder he has insomnia? Is it any wonder he's stressed out? You know, so you start to evaluate these things. And we had a team, you know, but they didn't really know they were a team. And that's something I'll talk about a little later at the end of my talk today, is that we had many different people who were trying to understand, you know, doctors, clinicians, professionals, what was going on. So in April 1st, actually, of 2014, Robin had a panic attack. He was away shooting, what was he shooting? He was shooting Night at the Museum. And he was given an antipsychotic then. And what I know now is that giving an antipsychotic to someone with LBD can be very dangerous. And what I witnessed happen to my husband over the next 3, 4, 5 days was extreme confusion, heightened symptoms from what he'd already been progressing or degressing downward into, spiraling into. It worsened completely. And so I was fighting for them to take him off of them. And those of us who were in the know, we all agreed, like, this is not working. And the thing about psychotics is when you take an LBD patient off, it's progressed the symptoms of LBD, and those symptoms don't necessarily retract afterwards. And I would have to say that Robin's symptoms did not necessarily retract after he was taken off the antipsychotic. So it's really something, that's another real red flag and hallmark to know about this disease. I think there's been some advancements. It's definitely something you want to check with the specialist. So that was happening. And then they decided, well, there's another thing about medications for people who have LBD. And this is something I certainly learned later. All the stuff I learned later was that people who have LBD tend to be sensitive to medications. And it doesn't mean that, it can mean, like in Robin's case, very little of a drug would be necessary, but also a drug that you would think would have a certain effect could end up having a total opposite or very strange effect. So it's not, that's something to really watch out again with LBD patients. And so Robin was, Robin had a prior history of depression from much earlier in life. And one of the things that was a distraction, if you will, a kind of a red herring, was going after starting to treat the depression with antidepressants. And what this was really, this was all part of treating the symptoms rather than the underlying disease. So again, very light antidepressant a few months before Robin passed is what they started. And then also finally, a few months before he passed, he was diagnosed finally with what seemed to be a diagnosis, and that was Parkinson's. He was given the Parkinson's diagnosis. And I'll never forget when we went to the general neurologist to discuss that diagnosis and to see what we were going to do from here. And my feeling personally was, I was so relieved we finally found what the answer was, so we could just get into the solution. Okay, what do we need to do? And I could tell Robin wasn't really buying it, and in that office, in that appointment near the end, and this is something I've found as being a parent. My sons are now 21 and 23, but there's something about parenting kids that it's before you put them to bed at night, or before they're about to leave the door, out the door for school, or leave the car, or it's the conversations at the back of the car. They always save the most important thing for last. It's always that, it's the most heartful question they have is right before they're about to, leave, or the appointment's about to be over. And this is why I actually have gone to Capitol Hill to fight for doctors and neurologists to have more time with patients, certainly not to have their time taken away. So the last question Robin asked was, when the doctor was saying, you just have Parkinson's, we're going to get you on this medication and you start feeling better. Robin's question was, do I have Alzheimer's, dementia? Am I schizophrenic? And the doctor immediately said, no, no, and no. You're fine. You just have Parkinson's. It's all going to be okay. And what I can say now is that even me as an artist, because of what I know now, that question would have made me pause. As a patient, or excuse me, as a parent, I would have said, why are you asking that, Robin? What makes you feel that way? And that's not what happened. So we went down this road of thinking it was Parkinson's and began adjusting the Parkinson's medications. And so I just want to talk a little bit about cognitive reserve, because people would ask me, well, gosh, it just happened so fast. And the reality is, Lewy body was in there for a long time. And there's this compilation, this crescendo that happens, and things get set off over time. Like I mentioned, there was probably a long prodrome phase. I'll discuss in a little bit about the idea of mixed pathologies that were going on for Robin, which is a lot more common than I ever knew. It's very common. But Robin was able to sustain living while he was actually, his brain was, it's just like going through quicksand. I felt like I was watching my husband die in front of me, and he was. He was sinking in quicksand, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. The reason he was able to somewhat stay, above water for as long as he did is because he had tremendous cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve is there's more of that in people who are geniuses or have high intellectual capacity or high IQ. And what that basically means is that they have been able to push out and create more circuitry in their brain that's operational, more highways and byways, so that when they need to retrieve a piece of information, they have multiple routes to go get it and bring it back. And so Robin was excellent at that. He was a genius, and he was also Juilliard trained actor, and he could stave off the symptoms longer than most, much longer than most. But then it was like the dam suddenly broke and he couldn't hold it back any longer. So it can appear that it's a very rapid progression. And while Lewy body is comparatively to other neurodegenerative diseases, that's why it can appear that way, but it's not necessarily so. So my point is, the damage was so rampant throughout nearly his entire brain and brainstem, and that's what was revealed in the autopsy. Robin had one of the worst cases they'd ever seen. And I took his last 2 years of medical records, coroner's report, and brain scan to 4 specialists in the United States and had them review it, and then compared notes and discuss with me what they found. And what I wanted to leave no stone unturned in my understanding of what happened. And they all agreed it was one of the worst cases they'd ever seen. And with that much damage, it was actually amazing that he was still alive for as long as he was. So we were a week away from inpatient neurocognitive, from deciding on which inpatient neurocognitive testing facility he would go to. Because so the professionals in our world were seeing that there's something more going on here, and they wanted to put him in an inpatient facility. Well, I'm quite clear in my husband's brain, he was thinking, they're going to lock me up. They're going to lock me up and I won't be able to get out. And I think that he knew there was far more going on. While we were partners and I understood so many of these symptoms. There was one that he was holding back, and I didn't find this out until the autopsy, until I discussed that autopsy with these professionals and they told me what they saw. Robin never mentioned that he had hallucinations. And I said that to one of these doctors. I said, you know, Robin had all these things, but he never had hallucinations. And the doctor said to me, oh, Susan, believe me, he had hallucinations, you know, based on the damage throughout his brain and in particular areas involved in that. I couldn't tell you which area it was off the hand, you know, off the top of my head, but there was that present too. So the thing is, Robin never, you know, back to the idea that we didn't have a diagnosis. Robin never got to know what was happening to him. And I never got to know what was happening to him or while my husband was alive. I never got the luxury of saying to him and comforting him with a sentence like, you know what, honey, you're not going crazy. You have a brain disease. This is not your fault. And even if I had to say that 100 times a day to remind him, just to hold his hand and say, you know, you've got a brain disease. That's what's going on. And it's okay. You know, we're going to get through this. I mean, I could say some of that, but I didn't have the facts. I didn't understand. None of us did. So it was several months later, after Robin had gone, that I learned about, again, when the coroner's report and all these documents were studied by these other doctors, reviewed by them, and then reflected back to me. It was the forensic neuropathologist, I think was his title. He really taught me about, and this was shocking to me. First of all, the relationship between what he saw that in Robin's brain was that Robin had, yes, he had the alpha-synuclein deposits, the aggregates, the Lewy bodies, if you will, throughout his entire brain and brainstem. Hands down, that one won. Okay, that messed up protein, the misfolded protein, alpha-synuclein, was far in the lead. He also had tau tangles present, which is the Alzheimer's. He had plaque. So he had these other proteins in there, 3 that were compounding the situation, if you will. And I remember being shocked and saying, so he had Alzheimer's as well? And then he explained Parkinson's. You know, I said, well, what about the Parkinson's diagnosis? Was that correct? And it's like, well, there's different ways of looking at it. Clinically, he was showing the effects of Parkinsonian symptoms. So clinically on the outside, yes, he had tremors. He was thrashing at night. He had the Parkinsonian mask, the shuffling gait. He had all these things. So clinically, you would look and think he has Parkinson's. But pathologically, what was overriding the whole thing was the fact that his neurons were compromised and dying and losing their function from the alpha-synuclein deposits, misfolded proteins. And he, I just totally lost my train of thought. I was watching how much science I'm saying right now, and I don't know if that's okay, if I'm way over my skis, Walter, but I'll keep going. So he had all this going on. Oh, this was the point that was kind of blew my mind was, okay, so he had Parkinson's, but Lewy bodies here. And what was explained to me is that it's actually on a spectrum. It's a spectrum disease, that you have PD on one end, LBD on the other end, but the essential underlying shared biology is the Lewy bodies themselves. And that blew my mind. And in fact, I was a little pissed off because as someone with a background in marketing, graphic design, communication stuff, I thought, no one is talking about that. This stuff is so actually interconnected. It's so close to each other. And we didn't get, I had no understanding of that. So I took this and I started to learn more and more, trying to make sense of what we'd gone through. And what I know now is how closely knit these diseases are: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lewy body. Those are the ones that really have the proteins that destroy neurons in the brain. And so in 2016, I wrote an editorial for the American Academy of Neurology. They asked if I would write a 3,000-word editorial. And I did, and it's titled "The Terrorist Inside My Husband's Brain." And what I want to say is, back when I wrote that in 2016, I didn't feel like, my sense then was, what would it have mattered if we had a diagnosis while Robin was alive? There is no cure. So why would it matter if we had a diagnosis? And what I can tell you is everything I've learned and all the amazing scientists and doctors and professionals, Walter included, everybody that I've spoken with in the last 5-6 years, I have completely changed my mind. And diagnosis is everything. When I reflect on our experience and what I know other families are going through, and not only with this disease, but so many diseases, none of us get out of here alive, and we only have a certain amount of time. And time is the most valuable thing we have. And for someone with an LBD diagnosis, at least you would know, you wouldn't have to you could stop chasing this unknown foe, this hidden killer. You could stop chasing and go, okay, I get to take my power back now. While I may not be happy about this diagnosis, at least I can have the choice of seeking out real specialty care. Because with a disease like this, not every general neurologist, not every doctor is going to understand, even be able to spot it, let alone know what to do with it. So if you have the diagnosis, if you know exactly what's there and where it's there, and that's something I'm really put a lot of my personal emphasis on in the last several years with my work at the American Brain Foundation, is focusing on diagnosis, a clear-cut biomarker that shows where it is, what's there and where it is. Not just a yes, no, not just okay, it's present, Lewy bodies are present, woohoo. No, we need to know where they are and how many and what else is in there as well. The tau and amyloid, we need to know the trifecta is kind of where I'm coming from these days. And so with this shift of personally really feeling like diagnosis gives you your power back. It allows your loved ones to have those conversations with you that are more informed. It allows fear, which is perhaps the greatest robber of time. Fear makes us change our focus to all these false narratives, these false fears. Again, back to the analogy of children. I'm a firm believer in really giving kids the truth, and that the truth is in everything, to adults and adolescents and everything, is the truth of our experience, the truth of what we know, and trust a little bit more that they're going to do okay with that. They can assimilate the truth, and that a child without the truth is going to imagine the worst monster possible. And that's, to me, what happens with Lewy body. Without having a diagnosis, you're imagining the worst monster possible and that it's your fault. So, one of the things that Robin suffered very badly from was one of the symptoms of the disease was he had horrible anxiety and fear and paranoia, but his anxiety was through the roof. And this was, depression was a tiny symptom, barely anything. Many of the things, they were barely there, but they would come up a little bit. This anxiety was unbearable. And Robin did everything he could to try and control it, including seeing a hypnotist at Stanford who gave him some tools. We did all kinds of things, but it would not calm down. But one of the things I found out from the autopsy report is in the amygdala area of Robin's brain, that region was completely rampant with Lewy bodies. It just, imagine Pac-Man going through and chewing up all the neurons. And that's where we have the ability to handle, to regulate our emotional response and fear it particularly. And so again, this was part of the healing for me. And I wish so badly Robin had a chance to know this while he was here, is that this is why he was experiencing these feelings. So another thing about getting your power back when you have a diagnosis is that you can make a choice about, what, I can be part of the solution here. I can be in clinical trials. I can work with more informed specialists. I can be in clinical trials. I can make arrangements if I want to donate my brain, or I can do nothing. I can go do nothing. Or maybe I want to get my affairs in order now and handle that with my family. Or maybe I just want to go on vacation. Forget it, you know? That any human being, every human being, that's our God-given right, you know, with our time and choice and having our power. And so anyway, that's, there's one last thing about that. When you have a proper diagnosis, then you have more of a chance of getting the correct help. And that's key, particularly in a disease with Lewy body. If you remember, as I mentioned earlier, about the problem with antipsychotics. So that allows you to have the disease start to be treated rather than just the symptoms. You know, maybe you can work with someone to treat both, but you're not only focused on these random symptoms. And you can also help push science forward, which is the only way we're going to get to solve this stuff. So the last, you know, another thing, and people like Walter have said this so well, you know, and I appreciate the clarity around this, is that, you know, with the diagnosis, you can understand and know that what's happening is neurologic and not psychiatric. And that's what's so difficult, I think, for the general public to assimilate about so many diseases right now. You know, people have become very accustomed to verbiage and understanding of depression. And therefore, because there's greater understanding of depression, many things get just thrown into that category, which are more based in neurologic and predominantly neurologic. And so I think that's an area that I look forward to more understanding and more, you know, in the general populace to understand that better. I think a lot of relief can come in many, many ways. And it can also in turn help the professionals who are trying to treat people. So I'll just mention a little bit briefly about the American Brain Foundation, which I am vice chair of the board there. I'm in my 6th year on the board. And one of the things I'm just so grateful for is that I've been able to be a part of spearheading this project, the Lewy Body Dementia Project. It's a biomarker project that we developed. And we gathered some of the top researchers from around the world to design a research grant award that's targeted at finding an early biomarker, you know, with the caveat that we want it to be clear. We want a crystal clear biomarker, you know, and we'd reached out to families who'd lost someone to LBD already, some of our supporters, and everybody hands down said they wanted to go after finding a biomarker, to do something to help diagnosis while someone's alive. And that was exactly what I felt too. So I was really excited that everyone was all in on this and that the scientists were all in on it too. And then what got really exciting is that Michael J. Fox Foundation, Alzheimer's Association, they stepped up and gave us major funding towards funding this grant, because they understand, as I explained earlier, that this stuff is so related. Yeah, the science is related it's in some capacities, it's unrelated and very important to study the differences, but it's also really important to look at the similarities. And so part of that, we're so proud of that we've come together and collaborating on this. And the ABF's main partner is the American Academy of Neurology as well. So we have this think tank of professionals that are going to be reviewing the science projects as they come in and deciding by the end of the year, we'll give away the first $1 million for this year. And then over the next 3 years, we're going to give $1 million per year. And we're actually looking at raising $2 more million by the end of the year to hopefully cap out at $5 million total towards this drive. And, you know, we're really hopeful that we'll see some results that can play into what's happening at the NINDS, that can play into what's happening at other organizations across the country, and be a part of strengthening the resolve in this ecosystem to go after this disease. And hopefully that will, you know, shed a lot of light on the other diseases so close, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So let's see. I think I'm going to be closing because I feel like I've spoken for almost 30 minutes. I might be a little early according to the clock, but what I want to say is, what I want to close with is when people ask, you know, what to do if they have a loved one going through that, or they suspect and LBD and you know, what to do. And to really boil it down, the few things that I see as most important is, as I mentioned earlier, is this idea of working with a team. And, you know, that team should include a specialist who knows about Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Lewy body. And, you know, not everybody does. So finding a specialist who, and then also part of that team is a movement disorder specialist who tends to have more experience with the medications and would certainly understand that an antipsychotic needs to be handled with kid gloves, you know, things like that. So you have this team built, and a lot of organizations are really crafting this team approach, which is brilliant. You know, maybe there's a physical therapist involved as well, maybe a psychiatrist, but they're all, the thing that's key is that they know they're a team. They're sharing information. This team approach, in my opinion, is the only way to have it as successful as possible. What I want to say, it's an outcome of whatever is remaining left. You know, we don't have this solved yet, but we can do. We're going there. We're going there, and it may be sooner than we think. And it's just we no longer is it like, oh, the doctor's over there, the scientist is over there, and the patient's over here, the caregivers in the background. Everybody needs to work together on this, and that is where we can make I believe the quickest advancements on this disease. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap, and I just want to thank everybody who, you know, everyone for being here, whether you're a patient, a caregiver, a professional in the field, whether you're in another disease area that's with similar challenges that LBD has. And, you know, God bless you for what you're doing for that disease, rare as it probably is. And I also want to thank whoever's on the call here that has had anything to do with helping move things forward as far as Spark and Robin's Wish. And I guess that's it. So we're going to open up for questions. Walter and I will be at bat. So send in those questions and we'll do our best. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Susan. And I'm sure everybody was touched and learned something from your talk today. I first want to turn to Angela Taylor, someone you know well from the Lewy Body Disease Association. Angela.
Hi, Susan. Lovely to see you and hear your story again. You know, one of the things that you have done remarkably, obviously, is to leverage the platform that you have to raise the visibility of the disease. And it's absolutely remarkable. You know, I always called myself an accidental advocate, and I suspect you may feel somewhat similar to that. One of the things I always share is that I think there's a role every single person can play in raising and elevating the visibility of this disease. What do you hope that those people are on this call take away about the importance of public awareness of Lewy body dementia and where it falls within that spectrum of dementia and movement disorders? You know, what is your, I mean, this is almost your own legacy that you're creating that you never anticipated doing. So, you know, if you could project out 5 years to that impact you want to have and what you want other people to do, what would that look like?
Thank you, Angela. It's so good to hear your voice. And yeah, I'm definitely a reluctant advocate. As my friends and family know, it's like, I didn't ask for this, but I feel like it's my personal duty, you know, in many ways. And I think that there's many people on the call who feel that way. And you know, my belief is that our experience is our greatest asset. And we don't always ask for the experience we get in life, but it kind of feels like it's our job to do something with it, to help others. And so I think what people can do is just by, first of all, I really want to underscore that Robin's Wish and Spark are two films that they do a lot of the talking. They convey, I think they're excellent. They've been excellently done. And I don't think excellently is a word, but it is now. They carry a lot of the message. And, you know, for people just to know that there is, there's usually more going on. You know, I remember Admiral Mike Mullen said to us once, actually in the filming of Robin's Wish, that, you know, when someone commits suicide, for example, there's always more going on. And so the point is not to take any of this stuff at face value. Even people's behavior at times, you know, for example, Robin's, like there's stuff going on underneath. So, you know, I really believe there's just so much more that's neurologic. You know, a lot of these things are neurologically based. And just by having an understanding of that something is neurologically based, automatically starts to pull away from the power of shame, the power of fear. All these things start to diminish when you start to get into the solution of it. And I want to say too that I hope that people get more interested in going after an understanding of what's underneath that thing. You know, what's underneath the disease that's taken their loved one from them, and what can they do about it? Or the disease that's causing their loved one to suffer, whether it's Lewy body or something else. And how can I be of help to whatever research is going on? Where can I direct people? Where do I need to go? You know, so it's this idea of not running from it, that in a way, the answers are not as scary as having no answers. So if you're sitting in a position of fear, go find some answers. So I could probably answer that in your question, Angela, with like about 50 million other things, but I'm gonna think I'll stop it right there. I hope that helped.
Thank you, Aunt. Thank you so much, Angela and Susan, for that. We have a difficult question. So think about this one. There's a question from Robert Stone, and it's about the issue of diagnostic biomarkers, which I am very optimistic that there will be very accurate tests for Lewy body synucleinopathy. And the question is, at what stage in a person's journey should this take place? Should it be a panel for the general population at a certain age, regardless of symptoms, or should it be targeted to some set of symptoms, unique or not?
Can I answer that, Walter?
Yes.
Okay, and if you have something to add or correct from what I say, go for it. You know, my understanding now is that there is a blood test for amyloid. Again, I mentioned the amyloid beta, the plaque problem, the tau tangles problem, and then the alpha-synuclein problem, which is the Lewy bodies. Those three are the major players, and the presence of one can exacerbate another, and it makes it an absolute mess for any professional doctor to know what the heck to do, in my opinion. Like, it is amazing that they're able to even treat the way they are right now. And then it roll that out to scientists. It makes it difficult for them. It makes it difficult for the patients, everybody. So to me, the most immediate thing is that, well, we do have this blood test now for the amyloid plaque. So we understand it's there. That combined maybe with scan and a few other diagnostics to get a clearer picture. Pretty soon we're going to have tau, a blood test for tau, but we don't have anything for the alpha-synuclein. And again, it's not going to be good enough to just have a yes, no answer for any of these. We need to know where they are, how many and where they are of all three. And that's what I'm really intent in fighting for. And I see that can make a huge difference for all of us. And to immediately answer that question, my sense is that this is all about, it's moving into the field of prevention, okay? That I don't think it's too early. You don't have to start, by the time you start showing symptoms, it's kind of, the balls are, you know, I'm trying to search for an analogy. The bull's already out of the pen. The cows have left, whatever. The horse is out of the barn. That's what I'm looking for. The symptoms, it's not too late, but you're in a different ball game. And so why not have really clear diagnostics for all three of these when people are younger, and they can start adapting some changes and maybe actually involving some very targeted type gene therapies that might be, developed by then, avoiding certain behaviors, do some behavior modification, and or even start in clinical trials. Like that would be a healthy system, is to go early. There are things in development for actual symptoms later on. It's not like, people who have this are going to be abandoned. That's not what's happening. But I think what is happening is that a realization that this stuff is not going away. In fact, it is, more people, the numbers are showing more and more. It's not, the numbers of it being actually genetic are low. The exacerbation comes from more environmental and toxic in many different ways. And so we are more likely to be able to achieve prevention before we're able to clean up the entire planet and our food and everything that we absorb. So there you go.
Great. And I have a question, I guess, from Cheryl Herbert. Cheryl, are you able to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yes. Hi. Thank you. First thing, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I'm actually a mom to an 11-year-old with a rare disease that affects her brain. And so while our stories are very different, can understand the pain that I think a lot of people can feel when you're watching, even when your child is a newborn, you can tell something's not right. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm with a nonprofit organization that's in partnership with Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. And we're focused on pediatric stroke, rare disease, neurological diseases. And I'm also a professional by nature in communications, PR, and marketing. And I have a unique opportunity where I'd really love to hear from you, where you think, based on the circles that you're traveling in with in the medical field, advocacy world, an advocate, where do you think, or where are you seeing the gaps that you think the pharmaceutical companies and scientists and the general public, like, where are the gaps that we can be working together so that those people that are in positions of influence, particularly the PR communications people, which you had stated you have a background in, can help with advocating, help to close those gaps, to help raise awareness for these types of rare diseases? Are there things that you see where there are just opportunities that are not being taking advantage of, or there are connections that are not happening within this world that you are now living?
Gosh, that's a great question. And I wish I had a really clear answer for you on that. I think there are so many gaps, and I'm not seeing one that is more outstanding than anything else. I think closing the gaps between the entities you described, I think the biggest drop off in information is that the public awareness is probably the one that's lacking the most. Mm-hmm. I think that the scientists and the doctors know more of what's going on. They have, my father he's a retired pathologist, and he, I say that just because I have a little understanding of doctors' communications, mm-hmm. and I have even more understanding now from the work I've been doing. And they're on it. They're more privy to the art of science, if you will. Yes. This is something I've come to really understand, is that science is actually an art, and the medical profession is actually an art, and that they're more aware of the ebb and flow of it, the rhythms of it, and where things are going. That information itself can give the general public so much healing just by understanding the general rhythm of these things, that science is actually, Walter, you can argue with me on this point if you want, but science is actually not a science. I see it more as an art. It's evolving. It's showing more. At some point, yes, it becomes a firm piece of data, but it's evolving. And people, I think, for them to understand, the general public to understand that they can really play a role in it. And that not only that, but if they can get more information downstream more quickly from science, from the professionals, that it will empower them, perhaps, you know, make them have a mind shift like, wow, I can actually do something here that's going to make a difference. Oh, or they can identify. So it becomes less of this us and them. You know, there is no us and them that's going to get us anywhere in this. So I guess I just kind of answered that, Cheryl, in the way that probably, you know, public understanding and awareness of how this stuff works and how the brain works a little bit more, and diseases and rare diseases, and how, you know, I have an issue with that term rare. You know, I mean, I remember being told Lewy body disease was rare, and I'm thinking, well, I got so mad hearing that. It's like, rare, well, my husband is gone. I don't, you know, and there's 1.5 million people who have it. You tell me that's rare, you know, tell that to those 1.5 times how many people are, you know, that's just the patients that we think we know. Like, I have a real issue with that word. So I think that marketing, you know, doctors need better marketing for sure, and they deserve it. They deserve it. They have work to do in the lab with clinics, everything else. They deserve better marketing. And I'm going to go one step further, Cheryl. And I think that, in fact, I've kind of felt along the way that a whole new industry could really develop that handles pulling these industries together communication-wise, and, you know, relates it to the public. There's so much good can come from that. So
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Great question.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you so much, Cheryl, for that. And Susan, thanks so much for your sharing your story and the really heartfelt back and forth with the folks asking questions here. So I think we do, however, have to move on. This was, I'm sure we could go on for hours, and we should at some point. But let me hand it over to Samantha now to move to the next session. Thanks, everyone.